Solving triangles. Example 1. So solve for the following triangle below for A if we know the angle for B is 35 degrees and B, the side, is 12. So let's go over what do we know. So we know B, which is 12, and then we know what B is, which is 35 degrees. And so what are we looking for? We're looking for A. So let's go over our three trig functions. So we know sine. So if sine of B, well, that would be the opposite over hypotenuse. So that's A over C. So we need to solve for A, right? But we don't know what C is, and we only know what the angle for B is. So we need to have two knowns and one unknown to solve for this. So let's look at cosine. So what's cosine? Cosine of angle B, well, that's going to be adjacent, so that's B over C. So this one's good because we do know the angle B, and we know the side of B. But we're not looking for what C is, so we don't actually need this one. So let's go over the next one, which would be tangent. So of the angle, which is opposite, so that's A over the adjacent side, so that's B. Now we know what angle B is, and we know the side of B, and we're actually looking for the side of A. So actually, this is the function we want to use. So that's great. And so now let's go ahead and plug in our values. So if we know that angle B is 35, so let's go ahead and put that in, angle. So the tangent of 35 degrees is equal to A over B, which is 12. Now let's go ahead and now solve for A, because that's all we need to do now. So solve. Now what we'll do first is we're going to get rid of this 12 on both sides to get A by itself. So if we just go ahead and multiply 12 on both sides, because whatever we do to one side, we do to the other, this gets rid of it in the right denominator on the right-hand side. So now we're left with just A. And then on the left-hand side, we're left with 12, and then times the tangent of 35 degrees. And that's what A is equal to. So A is equal to 12 times the tangent of 35 degrees. So let's go ahead and get our calculators out. So we have 12, and then we have times the tangent 35 degrees, close the bracket, and what's that equal to? Well, it equals 8.40. So A is 8.40, as we're going to round to the nearest hundredth, and that would be the length of the side A. So A equals 8.40, and so we solved for this first example. So let's do the next example. So example 2, solve for the following triangle below for the length C if B is 22 degrees and A is equal to 5. So let's go over what we know. B is 22 degrees, A is equal to 5. So if we're solving for C, let's go ahead and let's do all our trig functions to see what we can do. So the sine of B, which is 22, now that is the opposite over hypotenuse, so that's A over C. Now we know what A is, we know this, and we are looking for C, so we don't even have to go any further. We know that this is the right function to use. So let's solve for C. So in order to get C by itself, we need it to be in the numerator. So we don't need it in the denominator. So actually the first step, besides, let's actually first go what A is equal to. So that's 5 over C. So the first step we're going to do is we're going to multiply both sides by C. Now why we do this is we want to get it out of the denominator, right? So now we have c times the sine of 22 is equal to 5. So if we want to get c by itself, well, what can we do? So we have c times sine of 22 is equal to 5. Well, all we have to do is just divide on both sides the sine of 22. Now we're left with c by itself because this just becomes 1. So now we have 5 divided by sine over 22 will give us what c is. So let's grab our calculators. So we have 5 divided by the sine of 22, close the bracket. What does that equal? Well, it equals 13.35. So 13.35. So that's what c is equal to. So we solved for our side. Now let's do another example. So example 3, solve for the following triangle below for B and C. So we're solving for two things. If A is equal to 10 and A is 70 degrees. So let's go ahead and write all our functions to see which one we're going to be using. So the sine of A, which is 70 degrees, is equal to opposite. So that's B over C. Let's just do all three because we're going to have to find two sides. So we're going to be using two different functions to solve for this. So cosine of 70, so that's adjacent, so that's A over hypotenuse, which that's C. And then tangent of 70 is opposite, so that opposite of A is right, it's going to be the B over A. So now let's look to see what we're solving for. So anytime we see A, right, we can go ahead and we know this and we know this. And we obviously know the angles, so that's good. Now let's look for what we need to find. We'll circle it. So we need to solve for B, and we also need to solve for C. So these are what we don't know, or we also don't know this. So if we look, the first one you notice, we have two unknowns, right? Because B and C we don't know. So that one wouldn't be a good option to use. Let's look at the next one, cosine. Well, we know what the angle is, and we know what A is, but we're solving for C. So we use this one to solve for C. And then the tangent, if you notice that one, we have two knowns and then just the one unknown of B. So we're going to be using cosine. We'll make this bigger. So these two we're using. So let's go ahead and solve. So cosine of 70 degrees, right, is A, which is what we know. That's 10. And then C, which is what we don't know. So let's go ahead and solve for C. We're going to multiply C on both sides. This is just like the last example, just different numbers. So now we have C right on the left-hand side, and we want to get rid of C times cosine of 70. So we need to get rid of the cosine of 70 on the left-hand side. So how do we do that? We just go ahead and divide on both sides. Then when we divide it by itself, this just becomes 1. And then we're left with 10 divided by cosine of 70 degrees, which is equal to C. So, wrong calculator, let's use this one. So we have 10 divided by cosine of 70 degrees. Close the brackets, and what do we get? We get 29.24, because we're going to round to the nearest hundredth. So 29.24. So that's the side of C. So that's our hypotenuse. Now let's go ahead and solve for B. So we're going to be using the tangent of 70, right? The tangent. So we have 70. And then we have B, which we don't know, and over a, which we do know, which would be still the 10 here. So let's go ahead and solve for b. So the first step we're going to do is multiply both sides by 10. The reason why we did this is because we get rid of it on the right hand side of the 10 in the denominator. Right, to undo division, we multiply. This just becomes 1. So we're left with b on the right hand side. So b is equal to 10 times the tangent of 70 degrees. So let's go ahead and get our calculators out. Now we have 10 times the tangent of 70 degrees, and we get 27.47. So we have solved for both sides now.